Good evening, everybody. My name is McKay, and I'm just so delighted to be here this evening. I just want to say very briefly thank you to everybody for supporting this extraordinary conference, and congratulations to the Asia-Pacific Foundation and all the sponsors. This is an important thing for Canada to do. It's 3 years old, it's growing like crazy. The support that you were showing to this conference is extremely important, and we know that we're going to see more and more of you in the years ahead. So thank you all very much. We're in for a real treat tonight. And you'll forgive me, it's been a long time since I interviewed two world-famous astronauts. But we started by adjusting the climate in the room to make you feel like you might be in outer space in the moment. But we're going to have a terrific discussion. I'll do a brief introduction, but there is no time available to properly introduce our two speakers this evening, but I'll give it a go. I'll start with Dr. Koichi Wakata on the far left. Dr. Wakata, I'm going to call you Koichi if that's okay, Koichi-san, has a PhD in aerospace engineering. He's a Japanese astronaut and engineer. Koichi has 4 NASA Space Shuttle missions. He is a long-time resident in space, 504 days, 18 hours, and 35 minutes, I believe, is his duration in space.
Thank you.
Koichi was the first Japanese commander of the International Space Station. I believe you succeeded our friend Chris Hadfield in that endeavor back in 2009, perhaps. And last year retired as an active astronaut with the Japan Space Agency, or JAXA, as the longest serving astronaut, active astronaut in history. Koichi now works, indeed. Koichi now works for Axiom, which is well known to lots of people here, a private space infrastructure developer based in Houston, but of course with significant presence here in the Indo-Pacific as well as in Canada. So Koichi now lives back most of the time in Japan. We share a little bit of history in terms of places we've lived in Japan, but we're just delighted to be here. I should note that I think Koichi is the only person in the room who has a planet named after him. It's planet 6208, which is ironic because you're 20 days older than I am, so I know you were born in August 63, so they should have made the planet 6308. They must have found the wrong one. Koichi has played the great board game Go in space, and he's also played baseball in the International Space Station by himself. He can play a full game of baseball, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So welcome, Koichi. And to my immediate left is Dr. Shawna Pandya. Shawna is simply known to many of you here, simply an extraordinary Canadian. I think best understood and appreciated by watching her many TED Talks and video online presentations and interviews. If you watch Shawna present online, and you'll hear her tonight, you come to the conclusion that she is simply a practitioner of passion in every pursuit that she has. From an education perspective, an honors BSc in neuroscience from the University of Alberta, a master's in science in space studies from the International Space University, a degree in medicine, of course, from the University of Alberta, and a diploma in entrepreneurship from Singularity University. A few of the achievements so far in her young life: Shawna is an astronaut candidate for 2026 mission with the Virgin Galactic mission. And later we're going to see a picture of her and her 2 colleagues that are going up, the 2 other women. She is, of course, an emergency room physician, practices space medicine and neuromedical physician. She's an aquanaut who has spent more than 11 days under the sea, a diver, a skydiver, a pilot in training, a black belt in Taekwondo. But Shawna, I searched your bio. I don't see, you haven't played a single game in the NHL. Just, you couldn't find the time, or what?
I mean, I want to give everyone else a chance.
Yes, indeed, indeed. But welcome our two guests this evening. I just want to start with some background from each of you. Shawna, I'll start with you. You're clearly committed to making a difference in the world. What has driven you from a young age to this point of your life to wanting to make, and certainly making a difference in the world?
Yeah, why don't we start with the present and we can work our way backwards. So if you ask me about the 4 things that drive me on any given day, it's getting to space, making a lasting contribution to humanity's place amongst the stars through my work in space medicine, bringing the best of what we do in space medicine innovations to our most in need terrestrial healthcare challenges, and then helping democratize access to space. And everything I do on any given day ties into one of those 4 key objectives. But if we rewind back to when I was a kid, how I got here started through the power of inspiration and representation, because I was a kid growing up in the 90s, and I watched Canada's first woman fly to space, Dr. Roberta Bondar, and I thought, what, we can do that as Canadian women? And so I realized to get to where Dr. Bondar was at, I thought, I'll just follow in her footsteps. She's a neuroscientist, a physician, and an astronaut. So I'll just go study neuroscience, medicine, and then go be an astronaut. Because when you're a kid, it's really that simple. You break it down into 3 steps. And for the longest time, I was in a holding pattern. I was got my degree in neuroscience and medicine, and then as of June 20th of last year, I was assigned to a space flight. And so, you know, when we talk about getting to boundary-breaking places and pushing the limits, you know, it starts with realizing that not even the sky is the limit, setting big goals and then working really, really hard. And then also having the value of role models. So, you know, I've been lucky enough to spend time with Koichi-san up here, who's, you know, one of my favorite people to hang out with. It's great to, you know, spend time on stage. And then also growing up in the space era, you know, getting to spend time with some of the Canadian astronauts. I was lucky enough to spend time with Chris Hadfield, Jeremy Hansen, David Saint-Jacques, who are all just stellar role models of what it means to represent Canadian excellence in space.
Wow. Koichi, I think you're an aerospace engineer by training. You probably worked for an airline and then somehow got into the space race. Before I took on this role, I did a little bit of homework. I called my friend Marc Garneau, who of course was Canada's first man in space in 1984. But he said the two of you trained together in Houston in the early 90s. And he said that your group, Group 92, was called the Hogs. Yes. He wouldn't tell me why you were called the Hogs, so you can leave that out if required. But give us a sense of how you went from aerospace engineer to training with Marc in Houston and eventually spending 504 days in space.
Yeah, thank you, Master McKay. It's my honor again to be here with a wonderful Canadian colleague, astronaut Shawna. And as Ambassador McKay mentioned, I got to train in Houston, Texas with Dr. Marc Garneau as well as Chris Hadfield. Back in those days, nobody knew about Chris Hadfield. Everybody knew about Marc. And Chris was a great guitar player. But I still remember that I saw Apollo 11 lunar landing. Many of you have not been born before that, but I saw the Apollo 11 lunar landing, and I had a strong longing for flying in space. But back in those days, there was no Japanese rocket. There was no Japanese astronauts at that time. So I thought it was just beyond my reach, just simply a dream. I was always interested in making an airplane, flying an airplane. I studied aeronautical engineering, and I was working for Japan Airlines after school. And then one day, when I was commuting to Tokyo Haneda Airport, I saw a newspaper article that the Japanese Space Agency was selecting astronauts because Japan, together with Canada, are the partner countries of the International Space Station. We need to train our astronauts on the space shuttle so that we can build our space station using the space shuttle. So I applied because my dream when I was 5 years old came back when I was reading the newspaper article about the Japanese Space Agency selection. And I was just lucky enough to be selected after going through the selection process for about 1 year. And soon after that, I was sent over to Houston to join 19 Americans, 2 Canadians, Mark Garneau and Chris Hatfield, and 2 Europeans and me. And thanks to the international collaboration, I was able to work with very talented and dedicated people like Shawna, and then I got to fly in space 5 times. And it was really hard for me to speak everything, study and everything in English. I was born and raised in Japan, and I had to study English really hard to be able to fly on a space shuttle. And then I had to do the same thing when I flew on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. I flew 5 times in space, 3 times on the shuttle, once on the Soyuz, once on the Crew Dragon of SpaceX. But each time when we worked together, we solidified our partnership. And in space, I think we really need to have this partnership. And thanks to the great contribution of Canada and other partner countries of the International Space Station, I was able to fly. So in short, I was just lucky enough to be able to keep my dream of flying in space. And thanks to the international collaboration, I was able to get to do it.
I mean, lucky for sure, but determined and smart and driven to eventually, and we'll get into some of your missions later, but to have such extraordinary experience in outer space. I think I speak for most people here. Our only experience with outer space is following US politics. You give a much more, come on folks, you were all thinking the same thing. But we're looking forward to hearing about your actual experience up there. Shawna, innovation is a big, big part of your life through your academic expertise, through your private sector work, through your commitment to making space part of our lives and making our lives part of space. I saw a TED Talk you did 15 years ago, and you were talking about innovation, and you were talking about defining impossible. Again, where does this come from, and why does innovation drive you so much?
You know, that's a really good question, and I'm a big believer in pushing the limits because I want to prove or disprove a hypothesis, either that the limit is ever changing and we can keep pushing past it, or if I find a limit, I want to go break past it and find the next limit. And so that's always drawn me towards big ideas, big innovation, big challenges that will have tremendous impact on humanity. And you know, when we translate that into practical terms for what it means for a conference like CIAC, like this is the best possible time to be alive for technology, for innovation, and for human spaceflight. And we don't really talk about this enough, but I truly believe that space is the next great research laboratory. We're living in an era when we're developing pharmaceuticals in space that can have tremendous impacts for quality of life for back on Earth. We're talking about manufacturing semiconductors, fiber optic cables, new materials altogether, and we're seeing commercial entities. Adidas famously had an R&D project where they developed a new kind of foam on the International Space Station. And these are little secrets that shouldn't be secrets, because I think the whole low Earth orbit sector and economy is ripe for investment, and there's no perfect time no better time than now to talk about how we start catalyzing that innovation to space and bringing that back to Earth.
You talked about microgravity, and you were helping to design a spacesuit in an environment of microgravity. Can you help us understand what that means, microgravity, and that environment and how it helps you create products?
Yeah, absolutely. So microgravity is the nerd term for zero-G or weightlessness. And so I was lucky enough to be part of the first crew to test a commercial spacesuit in microgravity. And now at Axiom Space, you guys have much fancier Prada-based spacesuits, which if If you ever need a volunteer to try it on, just saying. But when we talk about getting innovation to space, we talk about TRLs, or technology readiness levels. And so, we talk about going from, it's not as simple as saying, I have an idea, let's fly it to space. It's advancing through various levels from 1 to 9. So 1 might be something that you scribble, a concept you scribble on the back of a napkin in a bar. 9 is something that has spaceflight heritage. And we do that to reduce risk because space is hard, space is expensive, and we want to retire as much risk as possible. And so with the spacesuits that we were lucky enough to test in parabolic flight, it was about getting advancement on that technology readiness level, testing in a parabolic flight that gives us a zero-G environment to advance to TRL 6 or 7. So at some point we can say, okay, we've retired risk, we know how this will act in a space-like environment, let's get it to TRL 8 and then 9.
Wowzer. Koichi, I want to get a little bit later to your further Canadian connections in space, but when you were appointed as the first Japanese commander of the International Space Station, what do you think that did for Japan, for young people in Japan, for the scientific community, for JAXA? What sort of impact do you think it had?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I was very fortunate to be at the right place, when Japan was participating in International Space Station program. I think, I had to work really hard to take the leadership of the International Space Station like Chris Hadfield did. And I really worked really hard to make it happen. But I think it's not because of me, but because of the trust that the partner countries had on Japan. Japan participated in the International Space Station program by providing a laboratory called the Kibo module. That Kibo means hope in Japanese. That's a big laboratory where we conducted a variety of microgravity experiments. And also, Japan developed a new cargo vehicle that's called Konotori that brought a lot of cargo to the International Space Station. They made 9 successful missions straight. And so these kind of achievements that Japan did ended up by having an agreement by the international partners that I could serve as the commander of the International Space Station. So I think everything is based on trust, and I was just lucky that I was a Japanese astronaut, and Japan contributed a lot, and like Canada did. So I was also very lucky to be part of this international collaboration. And all of my 5 flights, I operated the Canadian arm on all of my flights. I captured 3 satellites using the Canadarm. It's an amazing robotic arm. And I moved my colleagues, astronauts, on top of the Canadarm too when they were spacewalking. And so I don't know how much you know about the Canadarm technology, but it's the best in human space flight. And you got to be proud of that. And it also boils down to, but it also, not only the Canadian robotic arm, but also it boils down to the quality of humans, like Shawna, like Mark Gano, and Chris Hadfield, and David Shanjak, and Julie Payette, and soon your Canadian astronaut, Jeremy Hansen, who will be going around the moon. You got to be proud of him because he is the first non-US astronaut who will go around the moon. So Canadian robotic arm is amazing, but the quality of the Canadian astronauts is amazing. So I was just lucky to be able to work with these talented people.
I think you also you were the first to work with a humanoid robot, which was, you mentioned the word kibo in Japanese. The robot was called kirobo.
Yes.
So kind of a hopeful robot in Japanese English, kirobo. What was that like being the first to work with that sort of
Yeah, it was a
device?
very small robot. It's a cute robot. What I did was just a communication test. If the robot can, keep on communicating with us in board the space station. It's a very close environment. And of course, we have, wonderful crew members, crewmates together. But it was a test for future flights to Mars, for example. It's good to have some, talking buddy. And small robots could do that kind of work. So it was very interesting to be able to work with the robots, and then just kept on conversation. And because it looks so cute, actually it attracted a lot of people. But Canada is very, very famous in robotics technology, and then not only the big arms, but smaller arms. And hopefully we will see more cute, small, talkative Canadian robotic system that we have conversation with.
And that was the Kirobo experience. What was the Bob Thirsk experience?
Bob Thirsk, I had a chance to fly in 2009 on a long-duration flight. That was my first long-duration flight. Oh, you can see this. Yeah, it's a photo. Yes, this is inside of a Japanese keyboard module. Dr. Bob Thirsk was one of the crew members of Expedition 20, and I had a chance to fly with him. He's a great physician astronaut and very talented in many things. And then we operated the Canadian arm together, and we worked in a Japanese module as well. Not only these medical research and material science experiments or robotic arm operation, we get to do a lot of educational filming, what we call Tri-0G. We did a lot of performance proposed by students from all over the world. We did the high five, how it works, and if you do this rope pulling, what happens. You can see all of these in YouTube channels, but he's a great guy, and then I was really fortunate to be able to work with him. So all of my flights, I worked with the Canadian arms and then Canadian astronauts, and on this flight also, we flew with, I operated the robotic arm with Julie Payette.
Terrific. Shawna, as we sit here in February 2025, I think it's about 18 months before you will become the first female Canadian astronaut on a commercial space flight. What are your preparations like, and how are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that the only thing better than going to space is going to space with your friends. And I'm very lucky to be flying to space with an all-female commercial research crew. And I believe it's the only one announced to date, which is incredible when we consider that only... Thank you. To date, only 12 to 14% of space explorers have been women. So we have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to achieving parity in human spaceflight. And so each of the women that I'm flying with, Kelly Girardi from the US, Dr. Nora Patton, Ireland's first astronaut, we've worked together, we've trained together, we're more than colleagues, we're friends, and the commonality is passion and excellence. We were assigned to this flight because this will be Kelly's second space flight. She is operationally excellent. Nora is just so passionate about space flight. And so, the training is underway. We had our first coordinated microgravity flight in parabolic flight with the National Research Council of Canada in Ottawa through the Flight Research Laboratory in August of last year. So Canada is very important to us as an institute. We're a very international institute, headquartered in the US, have 500 students from over 60 countries to date. And really, it's, the future of looking forward towards 2026. We are underway with down selecting our science and our payloads. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But, I couldn't ask for a better team. So lucky to be flying to space with these incredible women.
We'll be watching and cheering you on for sure. But Shawna, you're also an aquanaut, which means you spend a lot of time under the sea. Can you give us a sense of, or what you anticipate, the difference in perception in your mind, in your body, in your anxiety about 11 days underwater and then going into space?
Maybe I'm naive, but I've been too excited to be anxious or nervous. And so, Koichi, did you ever do the Nemo missions? So we have two astronauts on stage. And so we have this concept in exploration called same, but different. And so you might be asking, why would you go underwater to prepare for space? And the idea is you want to get used to being in a remote, resource-limited, isolated and confined extreme environment. You want to get used to doing science and exploration and technology demonstrations in an area that's remote from your traditional creature comforts of day-to-day life. And so when you're underwater in an underwater research habitat, you are at pressure, you're at saturation, you have to decompress for a set period of time. So at the Aquarius Reef Base, where Koichi has been, it's 16 hours and 47 minutes before you can safely surface. At the Jules Undersea Lodge, it's much less than that. But the idea is that you're self-sufficient as a crew, and you also learn this concept that we call expeditionary behavior. You learn to be a really good crewmate. You learn learn to look out for the health of yourself, the health of your crew, because it's always awkward when you're the astronaut that's voted off the habitat and asked to leave in space. You know, there's only one way out, and it's not good. So through these Aquanaut missions, you know, I just talked about an all-female crew. I was the only woman on this otherwise all-male crew of Aquanauts, but there's no difference. The commonality is excellence. You know, I speak to both teams every single day because they're more than crews, they're family at this point.
Wow. I hope there's a movie coming out soon about it. Koichi, I've got to ask about your determination to play Go in space and also to play baseball. So folks, if you Google Koichi, you'll find him. It's a 1-minute video. He's got a baseball and a baseball bat in the space station. He pitches, in great form by the way, pitches the baseball, and then he launches himself to the other side of the space station and picks up the bat and hits the ball. And then he launches himself into center left field and catches the ball. And so essentially, I mean, it's just an unreal thing to watch. But was that your idea? And how much fun was that?
Yes, I have always been a baseball player ever since a little leaguer. And of course, I was hoping that Shohei Ohtani will go to Toronto, but he did not end up in going there. But Shohei can pitch and he can hit. But he can do only 2 things with the gravity. But you all can do 3 things. You can throw, and you fly faster than the ball that you threw, and you hit the ball. And you know, you're already Shohei Ohtani at the moment, but after you hitting the ball, you can catch the ball. So you can do 3 things: pitch, throw, and catch. So I just wanted to show what the microgravity can do. We use a microgravity environment to make new semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, developing new medicine, utilizing the protein crystallization. So with the gravity, lack of gravity, we utilize that environment to create new things that will benefit our life on Earth. But at the same time, I just wanted to show how different microgravity is. Even you, too, can be a better player than Shohei Ohtani. So that's why I just wanted to show that the video, because it's very easy to do that. I didn't have time to practice because we were busy on board the space station. I cannot play with the baseball. So I only practiced once, and then the second time I videotaped it with my colleagues' help.
So I need to go play hockey in space after this, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Shawna, can you talk about the international experience you've had in your space and aquanautic endeavors, your entrepreneurial endeavors, the collaboration? What's the feeling you get as a Canadian from Edmonton, Alberta? You've worked with partners all around the world. What does it do for humanity to have such extraordinary international partnerships in risky situations?
Yeah, you know, when we talk about what the future of human spaceflight looks like, there are 2 big hurdles on the horizon, or opportunities, depending on how you look at it. So one is the rise of commercial spaceflight, because now we're seeing more than just the healthiest of the healthy go to space. We're seeing the folks with chronic disease, folks who may have been eliminated in a space agency selection, have access to space. And so preparing for a future where we're dealing with all sorts of medical conditions, managing them to keep folks surviving and thriving in space. And then the other horizon in human spaceflight is going to ever distant, ever more complex and challenging locales and complex mission profiles, starting with lunar exploration and the Artemis missions, going to the moon to stay and establish permanent surface operations, exploration, and also using the moon as a testbed for Mars. And for those who haven't heard much about what Mars exploration entails, it is a lot. So it's a 6 to 9 month journey to get there. And then that's not even withstanding how much time you spend on the surface of Mars and the 6 to 9 month journey back. And that with those great distances come communication delays. So you can expect a 6 to 48 minute one-way communication delay. And then when the sun is between the Earth and Mars, you can expect a 2 to 3 week communication blackout. So that's a lot. So we can't do it alone. Canada can't do it alone. Japan can't do it alone. The U.S. can't do it alone. There's so many opportunities for every country to carve out its niche of excellence. And so, I once heard Marc Garneau say that you will never get as much bang for your buck as you do from the investment in the space sector in Canada. And we've created this reputation of excellence for ourselves in operations, astronautics, space health, and of course, robotics. And so now more than ever, there's opportunities with Artemis, with Mars and beyond to collaborate on doing increasingly complex things in space, creating new investments in pharmaceuticals, creating new test beds on the moon. We're already seeing countries that we previously haven't seen in international collaboration, like the UAE step up for lunar rover development. So really now is the time to accelerate that if we're serious about being a serious investor, a serious player, and having a voice in humanity's future in space.
Wow. Koichi, you had a 30-plus year career in the Japanese Space Agency, now called JAXA. Then you transitioned to Axiom, privately funded space infrastructure development firm. First of all, what's the difference? And what do you see this explosion of privately funded space groups bringing to the world?
Yes, basically, with a commercial entity, we're expanding the door or access to space to people beyond the international collaboration. Canada, Japan, United States, Europe, and Russia, we have been cooperating on the International Space Station program. But Axiom has already flown 3 private missions to the International Space Station. The first commercial crew mission was in 2022 with Mark Pathy from Canada. He was one of those commercial astronauts who flew to the space station. So we're expanding the access to people from conventional government astronauts. We flew the first astronauts to the International Space Station from Saudi Arabia, from Turkey. And next year, Axiom mission number 4 will be flying Indian astronauts, Hungarian, and Polish astronauts. Those countries had astronauts before to flew in space, but they have never been to the ISS. So Axiom company is expanding the access to those countries and beyond this International Space Station program. And this will expand, this will continue when we launch our new commercial space station, Axiom Station, starting in 2027. The current ISS will be decommissioned in 2030. For a seamless transition to the new commercial flight, commercial space station utilization, we have to start the building and then launching a spacecraft. So Axiom is getting ready for the new space station, which will be launched in a couple of years. And also, we are doing this commercial flights already. So by the time our space station is on board the space station, we are ready to produce and we are ready to conduct experiments from day one by having those expertise already built in those private astronaut missions. And I'm glad that Canada was being part of that, the big role.
Indeed, indeed. Shawna, I'm thinking back to one of your TED Talks where you were talking to people about being ambitious but managing expectations. You said, you can't be a neuroscientist and a rocket scientist. Did you do both to prove yourself wrong?
Through my career and my travels, it's been reinforced to me more than ever. We need folks from all sectors, from all disciplines, to build that brick wall of resilience because, it's the bridges, it's the mortar between the bricks that creates that strength because without the mortar, there would be no strength to the brick wall, it would fall down. And so we need to build bridges amongst our international partners, amongst disciplines, amongst pharmaceutical companies, amongst R&D, amongst the semiconductor companies, because, that's how we build a sustainable presence in space. It can't be all Canada, it can't be all Japan, because that's more prone to failure, especially if, we commit to creating the launch pad, the launch vehicle, the robotic arm, the astronauts. That's a lot of risk to take on. And so now more than ever, I'm convinced of the value of teamwork. And truly, we've joked about it before, but if someone wants to fund a mission where Koichi and I fly together and solidify those Canadian and Asian-Pacific ties, I think now's the time.
Shawna, in your wildest dreams, what do you think that space travel and space research and innovation will do for humanity in 10, 20, 30 years? What's your big, wildest, audacious dream?
So I'll answer that in a two-pronged fashion. So let me give a very concrete example of what is happening in innovation in low Earth orbit. So Keytruda is a well-known chemotherapy agent. It's used for mesothelioma, for cervical cancer, for head and neck cancers. And Merck, the pharmaceutical company, invested about $14 million up front to grow Keytruda in space because protein crystals, as Koichi was alluding to, grow more slowly and more symmetrically in the zero-G environment. And so what that means is in the current formulation, patients have to go into a hospital and give up a day of their lives getting an IV infusion that needs to be refrigerated to be stored. This new formulation has a different viscosity and is so much more stable that it does not need to be refrigerated, and it can be administered subcutaneously under the skin. So that means that if you were a patient, you can be trained to give yourself this injection, or you can go to a doctor's office. Think of the quality of life improvements. Think of the healthcare savings. Think of the changes this will bring on in healthcare. So that's one very practical example of where the opportunities lie. And this really is the time, if we're serious about advancing these new fronts of innovation, is continue to invest in them. And I think the other way that I want to answer that is the audacious future is when we talk about suborbital flight and point-to-point travel, going from LA to Sydney in a matter of minutes rather than entire days. I imagine a future in which people are so used to suborbital travel, so used to flying up high and being able to see the curvature of the Earth, that it becomes mundane and boring for them, and they'd rather go on their phones because spaceflight and accessibility to space travel is just so commonplace.
Wow. Koichi, you got to top that. You're at Axiom, you're inside this wonderful organization with lots of funding, with big goals, big dreams. What is your biggest, most audacious dream about what might come to humanity in the next 10, 20 years?
First of all, this afternoon I had a chance to talk to the girls' school in Singapore, talking with many students, the girls' student, and knowing that there's nobody from this country who went to space. That's when that kind of sensation I had when I was small. And with the commercial companies like Axiom, we're expanding the door access to space, and I hope more people from this country and from many Asia-Pacific region countries who will participate in human space flight. Canada has a strong partnership with Asia and a strong technology, so does Japan. But with this international collaboration from the government standpoint, as well as a commercial standpoint, with this international collaboration, I'm hoping that we will have more astronauts from all over the world, including Singapore and Asia-Pac and Canada, and Japan. I hope will play a key role in that one. So that's one thing. And also, based on our experience of a space shuttle and International Space Station program, we know in which field we can monetize the utilization of space, as Shawna was saying, as semiconductor area, and also fiber optics, and also pharmaceuticals, and probably making artificial organs and stuff like that. We already know, based on the past experience, where we can monetize the utilization. So we will be able to make in-flight, in-space manufacturing type facilities, like space factories, basically. So now we're at a stage where we can build those new facilities so that we can produce those things that is easily be produced in space down on the ground that will benefit our life on Earth. At the same time, with this kind of commercialization in space will give us more opportunity or more sustainable growth in human space exploration beyond the Earth orbit to the moon and Mars. So it's a combination of government-led activities together with commercially led activities, I think, that will benefit us for sustainable growth in human space exploration.
Terrific. I can tell by the clock on the wall that they want us to wrap it up, but I just wanted both Shawna and Koichi, there are hundreds of people here who have kids at home, many of whom may have expressed some interest or fascination with space. What do you want these folks to go home and tell their kids about the opportunities, the future, the dreams they can have?
Sure. So once upon a time, I was one of those kids. I looked up to Dr. Bondar. I looked up to Chris Hadfield. Koichi, I still look up to you. It's amazing to me that I, as a kid who dreamt of going to the stars, get to share the stage with you. You've accomplished so much. And so for those who have dreams of space, investing in space, for those who have kids who dream of space, this is the era to be involved. It's not just being a military pilot. It's not just being an engineer. It's not just being a scientist. We're in the era when the entrepreneurs, the artists, the storytellers, the policymakers, they all have a space within this sector. And so my message to the kids out there is figure out what you want to do. Work really, really, really hard to get there because a work ethic is free. And then don't let anyone tell you don't belong here. Make space for yourself because you absolutely do belong here.
Koichi, what's your message to
the
future, the next generation?
Right, so younger generation like Shawna will change our exploration. And to the new generation, I hope your children will be looking at or listening to what she's saying. And because, as she said, it's very important to dream. And no matter what your dream is, in any field, I think if you keep that goal, and then even if you fail, you can utilize that experience as a lesson learned, you can move on. So failure is an option. Actually, it's better to fail because that's the best time to learn from. So my message to the young generation is don't be afraid of a failure and aim high and strive towards the goal, and you will get there. The dream will come true.
Well, Koichi Shawna, Canada and Japan have a terrific history in collaboration in space, working together, researching together, building together. We've got a terrific future in space together. I just want to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your experiences with the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our guests this evening.
Thank you.